Well, something's going on here with YouTube. I'm with my wife's laptop. It may be a little choppy or laggy, but it says I'm live. I think I'll take YouTube's word for it. I am live. It's the Nazarite, bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore. So, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to talk about the chat, continue it from Monday, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a dialogue that I had today with a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints. The link is in the description, from the channel Christian Homestead. So shout out to him, to Jared from Christian Homestead, and shout out to Robert Harrison, who hooked us up. It was a really lovely discussion. If you want to watch the dialogue we had, by all means do it. Like I said, the link's in the description. For now, let's continue with the chat from Monday. So Spooky, the user Spooky, the viewer Spooky, he was talking about this idea of spirit or ruach being, when it speaks of, let's say, God and the revelation of God in the spirit, it's feminine, but when it's other sort of spirits, let's say, that it's masculine. And we spoke of how sometimes it would be a masculine verb for a feminine noun. So he says, right, and we were talking about the different ideas behind the word spirit, right, and what it could mean. And then he said this, or asked this. He said, but is the spirit of whoredom in Hosea 4:12, right, in Hosea 4:12, there's this spirit of whoredom. So he says, which masculinely causes us to err. Okay, is it not a lesser spirit than the separated spirit or the spirit of God? So we were talking about Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh is many times translated kind of a mistranslation as Holy Spirit. It's more the spirit of sacredness. But I mean, that's kind of, I guess it's maybe just me nitpicking, but the Hebrew, at least as far as the Hebrew is concerned, it has a specific meaning. Now, Spooky, he asked about, is not the spirit of whoredom a lesser spirit than the spirit of God? Right? That revelation of the spirit of God, which is feminine, is it not lesser? Or is the spirit of whoredom mentioned in the prophets, is it not lesser? I suppose another way to phrase the question is, are they the same, this spirit and this spirit, be it masculine or feminine? It's a good question. And I think that simply off the top of my head, I will say that this idea of ruach, it's something that has to do more with this world. And as such, it already comes baked right in, this idea of good and evil, positive, negative, masculine, feminine, whoredom, and sacredness, for all intents and purposes. So I wouldn't know which is a lesser spirit. I know that, for instance, in the different lore of the halls, what's called heichalot, halls or chambers, meaning spiritual halls, spiritual chambers, which we call halls and chambers just to sort of get a glimpse, right, some sort of semblance of what it is in our mind. If we're talking about that, then we see that there are hierarchies of messengers, much like there is a hierarchy of divine revelation, right? With the 10 sfirot, with the tree of life, from one point to the other. The thing is that there is the option of sort of turning it on its head, and there's also the idea of one tree of life's bottom is the top of the next tree of life, right? And the idea of 10 sfirot within 10 sfirot. So is it lesser? I don't know. I know that this idea of good and evil, of less and more, of a spirit of whoredom and a spirit of sacredness, this has to do with this world. It has to do with the duality which is manifested in this world, in masculine and feminine, in lesser and greater, in whoredom and sacredness. But if we're going to go with, let's say, something our sages said, they said that, and I've mentioned this before, during the 6 days of creation, God sees that it is good several times, and then he sees that it is very good, right before Shabbat. when he rests. And our sages taught that good is the good inclination, right? The positive vibration, the good energy, and let's say the spirit of sacredness, and very good, right? God saw that it was all very good, right? That it was very good towards the end, at the end of creation. He sees it's very good, and they say that very good, that's the evil inclination. That's what many I might consider to be the lesser spirit, that spirit of whoredom, that thing which causes us to error. Now, the Zohar and other places, they bring this wonderful analogy or parable, which story, right, which I've brought here before, and it's this. There was a king. The king wanted to see if his crown prince, right, his firstborn, is worthy of claiming the throne, or of ascending to the throne. And so he came to the harlot, right, to the prostitute that is outside of the walls of the hall, right, of the palace, or sex worker, if you'd rather call them that. And he says, I want to put my kid to the test to see if he has what it takes to master himself, because only then will he be able to master others as king. I want you to seduce him. Now, the sex worker, the prostitute, the harlot, does her job. She tries to seduce the son of the king at the behest of the king, right, on his command. She tries to seduce him as best she can. She puts her best moves on him. Now, the son of the king, let's say that he gets through it. Then he gets honor from the king, and he is found worthy, right? He proves himself worthy. And the prostitute, the sex worker, does she deserve any praise? Does she deserve any reward? The Zohar and other places answer, of course. Outwardly, she may have been trying to cause the son of the king to error, but truly she was simply carrying out the commandment of the king. The king's command is what she did. So does she deserve praise? Does she deserve reward? Definitely. It is through her actions that the crown prince was able to reveal the best in him. Had he been left to his own devices and not put to the test, then he would not have known. And he needs to know how to master himself in order to learn how to master others. He needs to learn certain things and experience certain things. He's that much of a better king for it. That's the analogy or the parable, right? That's the story. Now, you can, and I've said this before, you can come and say, wait, whoa. Who said the king needs to test his son anyway? Does he have no faith in his son? Does he have no faith in his abilities as the future king, as the heir apparent? And that's a discussion perhaps for another time. But just in a nutshell, there's a reasoning behind it, because the king wants his son to reveal the best of himself. He wants him, despite the trials, the tribulations, and the hardships, to learn mastery and discipline, because he wants to make him a better king, like his fathers before him. He wants him to rule with justice, with mercy, with eyes wide open. And that means being a person of empathy and of discipline and of character. And so he wanted to be sure, let's put it that way. And he wanted his son to reveal those qualities to himself through those trials. So this spirit of whoredom in Hosea, is it lesser? No, it's even greater. If you've got a good energy and a good spirit upon you, then it's easy to do the right thing, and it's easy to go with it and flow with it. And I'm stating this largely, right, by and large. But when something hard hits you, you need to dig deeper to find the strength to continue. You need to remove some layers, burn off some karma, whatever the case may be. You need to develop, you need to die and come back. You need to find more of yourself in order to get through it. You need to master yourself. You need to experience certain things. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, but if Spooky is asking, is the spirit of whoredom lesser than the spirit of sacredness, I'd say no. The spirit of sacredness has its place as a divine revelation and something that is us here for us to harness and use in the positive sense of the word and flow with. But the spirit of whoredom is what makes us really seriously develop in ways which we could not necessarily accomplish otherwise. Now, does that mean that you need to simply be a doormat to this spirit of whoredom? No. You need to do the right thing by you. We need to act to the best of our ability with righteousness. And that means that that spirit of whoredom is doing its job, and it's doing it in the best possible way, carrying out the command of the king. The evil inclination personified, let's say, spiritually in the angelic realms by to some degree, the angel of death, to some degree, the primordial serpent, to some degree, Satan, the adversary, or the Samech Mem, as he is known. His job is to set everything up for me to take a plunge and fail, right, to fall. It's my job to be the better man, for all intents and purposes, and withstand it. Sometimes fail, perhaps, but eventually strive for mastery, discipline, humility, to give things their right time and place. And then Satan, the adversary, that spirit of whoredom, is doing its job, and I am doing my job. And we are both doing the same job, which is trying to carry out our purpose, the commandments that we were given. Let's put it that way. The main difference is that it is in the nature, the divine, let's say, nature of the spirit of whoredom to be taken away from the world. And it's in our nature to cultivate that spirit, that image of God within us. And in doing so, bring ourselves and the world together, to that place where the spirit of whoredom and that thing that causes us to err, that of its own accord will evaporate and disappear like smoke. Let's continue with the chat, or let's see if there's something. You know what? Let's continue in the chat. No, I see there are a few people. Let's go with some people. Angel's Life. Hello, hello, hello. Hi. Shalom. How do you know what tribe you are from, says Angel's Life. I think I haven't seen you before, so welcome aboard. I know from my own family's tradition. It doesn't have to be accurate. It doesn't have to be provable. It's simply the tradition passed down from father to son, since that's the tribal affiliation goes by the father still. So how do I know? I know because my father is a Levite, his father before him, and so on and so forth. The lineage of my family in particular has a tradition, once again, only a tradition, not verifiable necessarily, the tradition of going way, way, way back and being very ancient. Now, this is not to boast, it's just what I know about the family. Hi, Nazarite. Hello, Timangwa. Good to see you again. Good to see you. Shalom to Robert, Mr. Hookup, who hooked me up with Christian Homestead. Ta-da! I caught the live. Woohoo, says Oregon Freebird. Good to see you here, Karen. Good to see you here. And Robert says, great video with Jared. Yes, I really, really enjoyed that. I enjoyed speaking with him a great deal. It was a straight conversation. You know, we were bouncing ideas off each other. And it was really lovely to have that. So thank you again, Robert, for hooking us up and connecting us. I'll continue with the chat from Monday. Little Andre said, everybody, it's not Jesus, it's DJE's smiley face. Yes. Oregon Freebird said, speaking of which, you caught the live, and now you're going to catch your live words later. Well, now, but later, since I'm saying them now. Isaiah 28:13, she says, precept by precept, precept by precept, line by line, here a little, there a little. They may go up and fall backward and be broken and snared and taken. Right? Ze'er sham, tzav latzav, kav lakav, kav lakav. There's a, it needs to be in context. It needs to be in context. But, oh yeah, and he says it right here. Little Andre says to Karen, most or many people don't understand that verse. It needs to be in context. And the context right now, I don't know it well enough. But I am going to come back to that, God willing. I'm not sure when. Let's see. So he says to Freebird, Spooky says to Freebird, depends on which church. Wait, so he's responding to what she said. She said a popular church doctrine is based on tares upon tares, but they teach it as a good thing, even though it is spoken about negatively in Isaiah 28. And so she says, following that, she says the verse precept by precept, line by line, here a little, there a little. I see. So it's your contention, Oregon Freebird, that that verse is about that, or rather that doctrine or teaching has to do with that verse. So he says depends on which church. And she agrees with little Andre that most people don't understand the verse. Okay. Jesus says, I know my nickname might seem offensive, but that was never my intent. It is pronounced Jesus. Americans usually get it wrong. DJ Easy's all the time. DJ eases the pain, says Spooky. It's pretty good. So good. So Spooky and little Andre having a back and forth there. And Christian Homestead was in the chat. Hi, Kansas, USA. Would it be possible to interview you on my channel? So, hey, we did that just a couple hours ago, and it's on his channel, as I said. Link is in the description to Christian Homestead's channel. He is very prolific. He uploads a lot. Now, most of it might pertain to his homesteading and the Church of Latter-day Saints, but I know that he told me during the interview that he's been spending a lot of time talking to a lot of people. So I'm thinking the dude has a lot of knowledge. Whether or not things stick around short term, long term, far be it from me to know. But the guy is very prolific, uploading every day and really taking this, really taking his studies right seriously. And that's and insofar as he is curious and thirsty for knowledge, and that's a great thing. It really is. Hang on a second. Okay. Wait a minute. Let's see. Let's continue or see if there's anything. See if there's anything else in the chat. Not right now. Okay, so we'll keep going with the chat from Monday. Jesus said. Wait a minute. Okay. Jesus said, "I will admit there's a small seed of a Messiah complex urging to burst, but I think that's something all those who seek feel." That you have purpose, or at least true agency. I'm inclined to agree. I mean, I don't think it's a complex in, let's say, in the psychoanalytical sense. I think that it is something that is urging to burst. And I also think that we need to let that out in small bursts. Because I think that most of the time that what you would call Messiah complex needs to be put on a back burner, on a low flame, because it's so volatile. And it can lead to such pride and arrogance that it's better to err on the side of caution and humility. But I definitely understand when you say that it's something that all those who seek feel. And I've said this before, when I was starting to get more into my studies of Torah and Chassidut after high school and during my first year of yeshiva, my lady friend, who later became my woman, she told me, and this is partly how I knew she's a very special person, she told me one night after there was like a dialogue, us and friends, right, a lively discussion on faith and religion, and she told me after people left, she said, you know what, you were a little arrogant. You were a little condescending this evening. And that's how I knew that she's really special, because she didn't say it in a backhanded kind of way. She didn't say it in an aggressive kind of way. She simply said it because she wanted me to be better. And if I had any doubt before, which I didn't, that moment I knew she's in my corner. By calling me out so precisely and delicately, doing it later after everyone left, and just saying it to me, not rubbing it in, just saying it very clearly and plainly, you know, you were a little condescending and arrogant. So first I decided I'm going to work on that. And second, I decided, yep, she's a special person. So to have true agency, all those who seek may have some sort of a complex, as you say, right? If not the psychoanalytical one. I know what you mean when you say that it might be the burden, right? The yoke of everybody who seek. That's a good way to put it. And I maintain that more often than not, it needs to be Not subdued, but kept in check, usually, more often than not, but to definitely let it out when the situation calls for it, because it can lead quickly to arrogance, condescending nature, a holier than thou kind of attitude, and that's a no good. Robert says, if you read the Torah, Tanakh, New Testament about what God has done, you get faith. Well, that goes right along with the sages who said that the first step is to just go out and in nature, just go out to nature, be alone there with the trees, with the grass, with the shrubs, be alone there with, sensibly, right? Don't go to a place where there's a bunch of wild animals necessarily, but out in the fields. Go there, go look at the water, listen to the wind, observe the fire, right? Feel the earth. Connect to that physical nature. Observe it with real purity, as much as you can gather. And you will be able to see that infinity in a grain of sand, right? I'm paraphrasing. But to see that divine, you'll get faith when you look at nature, right? Because when you talk about what God has done, then my go-to is creation and everything that entails. And you can choose to focus on nature. You can choose to focus on tradition, stories passed down, like in Tanakh. And much like I said with Jared in the dialogue, I said the thing is that if you're looking for something, you're going to find it. You're going to see it everywhere. Or maybe I thought of saying it, but I didn't. And if you're going into the Torah with this idea that I'm going to find God and see God through it, then there's a good chance that you are going to. You're going to sort of orient yourself in a certain way, and as a result of that, a direct result of that, the world will orient itself and sort of position itself in accordance with that which you mark as a goal, an aim, a path. This isn't 100% across the board, but it happens. Well, it happens a lot. Again, if you go there with a kind of purity and cleanliness, I'm not even talking about ritual purity or purity of the mind or purity culture. I'm talking about with that curiosity, that eagerness to know, or to know how much you don't know, and to observe oneself as an individual and part of a vast, vast creation. There's something there which harmonizes and which balances and which exists in all of nature and inside the individual. And when we are able to align ourselves with that, that's part of the channel to opening up divine influence, if you choose to see it that way. I certainly know what you mean when you say that. Christian Homestead says, I know, thank you so much, Robert. Little Andre says, it's referring to, and who can hear without a preacher, says Little Andre, because it says so in the next passage there. So that verse with the line here, a line there, and who can hear without a preacher? In essence, he says, how can you believe without a preacher? Well, at least at first you would need the preacher. But as the koan says, the Zen koan, when you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. But definitely in the beginning you would need that Buddha, that master, that enlightened one, to show you some kind of path before you make it your own, to be sure. And then again, to each his own. Some people go and adapt someone else's path for all intents and purposes, and don't stray and do their own thing. Maybe. And that also has some utility to some people. Depends a lot, I think, on the person's temperament and on that goal which they put forth. Like I said before, right? Things will position themselves in relation to that. Is it true, asks Spooky, that hey, the letter hey, means behold? Well, in what context? Hey is the, and it can also be, trying to think of where it would be behold. I'm going to need a verse, right? Chapter and verse or something, because nothing comes to mind. Hey itself does not mean behold. No, I don't think so. I think maybe with a nun, or maybe a final nun, or maybe with a couple of other letters, but not alone. Not alone, as far as I know. Robert said to Christian Homestead, he asked me how we can set up a daytime. Okay, so we already did that. I can go past that dialogue. Reagans is here. Hello, a new subscriber, or was a new subscriber. It's good. I'm glad you were there. I hope you return. I love the book of Deuteronomy, says Robert, and good night, Pinky. You hear that, Pinkadink? He said good night. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Karen said, Karen said, they teach not to read and understand as a whole, but a little here and a little there, separating the text from the context in which it is written. That can be detrimental. That can be very detrimental. Which is also why there are the traditional 13 attributes and methods by which Torah is derived from the text. Because of that idea of context and certain ways of pulling out halacha and lore and teachings out of that text, out of the Torah, out of the 5 books of Moses and, well, the 5 books of Moses. Let's leave it at that. Robert says, am I the only one who rewatches these videos the next day or after they go off? LOL. Is it LOL? I don't know what that is. I guess it's LOL. Well, I have watched my own videos, or at least parts of them, in the past. Sometimes I was looking for a specific, something that I said, and sometimes it was simply me curious about how it went, and sometimes, very, very rarely, it's me more. This is more so in my old channel where I had a lot more videos, 500 or so. Then it was just me trying to gather some strength from my collection of videos on motivation and encouragement. Those don't exist, I think, anymore, at least not in their previous form. All right, that was the end of the Monday chat. And so now I'm going to continue the chat from right now, live. Hello, people. Hello. So let's see. Oregon Freebird says, Karen says, in addition to my comments from yesterday, there is a popular song that says, every promise in the book is mine, every chapter, every verse, every line. From Genesis to Revelation. They forget that most of the promises in the Tanakh are in fact curses for not keeping Torah. Looking at it from the outside, it all seems quite bizarre. Read my last comment in the previous chat before you read today's. So I did that. Your last comment there was, I see, they teach not to read and understand as a whole, but a little here and a little there, which separates the text from the context. So you say that they forget. Oh, Timangwa said hi again. Hello. They forget that most of the promises in the Tanakh are in fact curses for not keeping Torah. Well, I guess I don't know this doctrine that you speak of, but I do know, like I said the other day, that for some people there may be some hope and promise in reading here and there. It might help some people get a broader scope of the Torah or the Tanakh. But if it's done in such a way where they take it completely out of context and warp it to fit some sort of agenda, I'm less inclined to go with that. The thing is that if what is guiding you in this little here, little there, a line here, a line there, if what is guiding you, if what's superordinate to all of that, those scattered teachings, if what is guiding you is the desire to be a good person, a righteous person, right, who finds favor in the eyes of man and God, and a person who does the right thing, a person who is humble, who is, if that's what's guiding you, then I think there can be a lot of purpose and meaning and great utility and function and practicality to a little bit of here, a little bit of there, a line here, a line there, tears, right? And tears of the pages. There's it's a great thing to keep things whole, but we as human beings are drawn to certain things, attracted to certain things, and not everyone can keep the whole thing. That's why, as I've said many times, there are There isn't one man or woman alive ever that can carry out the entire 613 traditionally commandments. Some are for kings, some are for Levites, some are for priests, some are for Nazarites, some are for men, some are for women, some are for slaves, some are for judges, and so on and so forth. You can't keep it all. What you can do is learn Torah, which is set against the 613. It's the same sort of weight. It has the weight of 613 commandments. Keep the Sabbath. That's the weight of 613 commandments rolled into one. And and there are a few other commandments which are said to be sort of set against 613, meaning even though there's no chance that you will be able to carry out and perform all 613 commandments in one lifetime due to your own limited and constrained nature, there are certain things which carry that same weight of 613 commandments. And that's kind of to convey the idea of something being superordinate, and all of those commandments and all of those things being kind of, what's the word, subservient? Or anyway, serving that purpose, that greater, more noble ideal and goal. If you're not going with that, and that's not what is guiding you, I can see how it can be very scattered, too scattered to sort of pull in and rally under one banner. But if that banner that you carry is one of righteousness and humility, then I think those tears and rips and scattered teachings can be of great service. I think they can. It may not be something to do from the get-go, right? But it can be. And that's maybe a dangerous thing to say, but here I am saying it. Robert says, who the last verse of Deuteronomy 29:29 talking about? Is it another country that is saying, we will keep these commandments? I never knew in Deuteronomy. Oh, okay, so let's see. Deuteronomy 29:29. Let's check that out for a moment. The JPS Tanakh, as per usual. JPS Tanakh, Deuteronomy 29, verse 29. There is no verse 29. So I'm going to skip ahead to 30 because sometimes the verses are mixed up in the different versions. So let's see. No, I don't quite understand. Or maybe you mean the previous verse. That could be as well. Is it 29:28? The secret thing. No, I don't quite understand. Robert, Deuteronomy 29, what verse? Do tell. Thank you. So he continues and he says, I never knew in Deuteronomy the kings of Israel had to copy that book of the law for themselves. Yes, they wrote it for themselves, a sort of miniature Torah, and they put it on their left arm, if I'm not mistaken. Because the king represents judgment, and because the king represents the left side, it's more associated with the left hand, with the left pillar, with withholding, and right, he is the law, he is the embodiment of rulership, right, of the divine rule and sovereignty and all that. Because of that, the Torah, which is represented by the middle pillar, the Torah tied to his left arm, arm, that's something which symbolically and practically keeps him in check, because he knows that even though he has the crown and the rule, right, and he is the ruler, he is the sovereign, there is someone that he serves, the people and the Most High. He is a servant. Yeah. So he writes that Torah there to remind him to not get too many wives, not get hitched too many times, not return the people to Egypt for horses or other material goods, and to be a righteous king and a good king. And we see in the book of Kings how much that was needed. We really do. So yeah, the kings used to write a copy for themselves, a copy of that part of the Torah. Robert says, I know y'all talked about Kabbalah in Christian Homestead video. But I said to Paula, I really wouldn't consider you a Kabbalah dude, even though you have knowledge of it. No, neither would I. And I forgot to say that, I guess. He asked me, do I practice Kabbalah? I said, practice, I don't. But I've studied it for a long time and I continue to learn it. But as I say here many times, I'm not a Kabbalist, right? I'm a student of the Tree of Life. So I would not consider myself a Kabbalah dude either, because I'm not living it out practically in the classic sense, which is why I'm not a traditional Kabbalist. But Kabbalah has, for something like close to 25 years now, like 20, something like 23, 24 years, has been guiding me, sometimes more in the background, sometimes more in the foreground, but always studying some form of Kabbalah or another. There were times, like during my military service, that it was like on and off, but definitely. Now, there are times to study Kabbalah. You're not supposed to study Kabbalah willy-nilly all the time, or at least according to certain Kabbalists and masters. So I, for instance, I keep it mainly to Shabbat. I study my book Pardes Limonim by the Ramak. I study that primarily on Shabbat, on new moons, festivals, holidays, times where there is a sacredness about the day itself and its essence, and that allows me to learn and study these very sacred and awesome texts in a kind of in a kind of sacred environment that is not necessarily dependent on my own sacredness. Because I choose to sanctify the day, be it the Sabbath or the new moon, a festival, whatever the case may be, I sanctify the day, and then the day has certain properties and energies and attributes. So even if I am not the most righteous person at the time, and I'm not, the day itself and the sanctity of it, it gives me, let's say, the permission to go more in depth than I would on other days. But Lord knows that if I'm in the mood, let's say, I'll definitely open it up every now and then, despite it being, let's say, a regular weekday. If the mood comes upon me during the week, I don't deny it. At least not usually. But okay, let's continue. So yeah, I'm not a Kabbalist, but Lord, I do love those teachings, and I love it when they are brought practically down into physical day-to-day living. That's what I love so much about certain Kabbalists that I've known and spoken to. You may, on the outside, they may not look like, gurus or I don't know what, but they have a body of knowledge that rivals I don't know who. And they're everyday people doing their thing, but they are much more than that. To be in the presence of these masters, the ones that I have been in the presence of, and to speak with them and learn with them, it's a great thing. Now, I call them masters because they were my masters. Other people might call them novices. Who knows? But I've been so privileged in my time to learn and to continue learning from people, with people, without people. Yeah. So let's see. Oregon says to Robert, yes, the kings were supposed to copy it according to Samuel, but many did not because it was lost for a long time and rediscovered during the time of Yoshiyahu. Right. The book, the scroll, which Shaphan, or was it Hilkiyahu? No, it was Shaphan. The book which the priests anyway found, there's a whole thing there. There's a big debate on whether or not it was a real scroll or planted there by the priesthood, because it's Deuteronomy which mentions the place which God chooses, the place which will be chosen. And so there are those who are critical of that and who say that no, the book of Deuteronomy was not an original part of the Torah. It was the priestly caste, the priestly tribe, the priests and their families who wrote the book of Deuteronomy and who sort of planted it at the temple to suddenly be found, because it glorifies the very place that they were serving at, and it elevates the Kohanim and to some degree the Leviim. It puts them up a notch. And other things that appear in Deuteronomy that have to do with the priesthood, that's what I think that's what prompted certain scholars or academic scholars, right, and people who study these things and maybe theologists, I don't know, to say that the book of Deuteronomy was planted, and that scroll that Yoshiyahu, that the scroll that was given, that was found by the priests in the temple, by Shaphan, I think it was Shaphan, then that was planted there. I have no idea. I'm the way I look at that piece of the Book of Kings is how Yoshiyahu took it. How did Yoshiyahu accept it? What did he do? He found something that was seemingly lost, or at least found, if not known that it was lost. Something was found, and he took it with both hands, and he said, "Oh my God, we have not been doing all of this. It needs to be done. The covenant needs to be renewed." And he goes about it forthrightly and forthwith. Same difference, right? He goes there immediately, straight ahead, and he eradicates this and that, and he reinstitutes, the Passover, and it's, even if you say that it didn't happen again, and that it's all allegory, and that it's a bunch of crap, and even if you say that it was a planted scroll, there's something about the way that Yoshiyahu perceived something new that could lead him to a better place, and he grabbed it with both hands, and he went all in, and he was committed. And that, I think, is what we can take. That's the bigger takeaway. Otherwise, it's just history, and maybe some would say made up history. And if you choose to look at it not just as history or a story, a fairy tale, and you choose to look at it conceptually of how does that mean for me as somebody who is trying to be a king of my own world, right? Master of my domain. How is it that I should go about? How is it that I should go about accepting the word of God? Or, it's difficult to trust human beings. And it was a human being who brought him the scroll. But when he perceived what he did from reading that scroll, it's not about it, if whether or not it was written by a person. It's what it did. And what it did was have him go through a real transformation. So it was a catalyst to something that was greater. You could argue and say maybe it was the wrong motive and the wrong catalyst, the wrong trigger. But what Yoshiyahu did was rally the people, renew the covenant. So whether or not he got there in like a kosher way, 100% great, I don't know. But the result of his actions, renewing the covenant, rallying the people, making tshuva, returning to the Most High, taking on even more responsibility as king and rising to the occasion, we should all be striving to apply that to our life. The negative parts of us, the things that need to burn off and go away, we need to do that and get on with it. The things that we need to adapt and the habits that we need to form and to cultivate, that also, right, we need to get on with it. We need to learn how to be our own kings and our own masters. And part of it is through the Tanakh and reading what to do and what not to do. And that part, even though it's in dispute, I still think there's a lot to learn from it. The fact that it was rediscovered is iffy, and it raises a lot of questions, but I take it as plain teachings, as, what does it have to do with me? The inner Yoshiyahu, the inner Shaphan. Robert says to Oregon Freebird, yeah, when I was reading Deuteronomy, I seen Moses said that, but I don't remember in the Tanakh if it was recorded they actually did it. But I wonder if it was the Most High's way of keeping them in his written word. Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. And it has other meanings as well, but that's basically what it was. To remember the word of God. When I say Torah, says Oregon Freebird, I am more referring to the Ten Commandments in general. I should have clarified. Okay. Deuteronomy 28:29. Okay, 28:29. Let's read that. Deuteronomy 28, verse 29 says, JPS, and thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not make thy ways prosperous, and thou shalt be only oppressed and robbed alway, and there shall be none to save thee. No, it's spoken of the children of Israel, and all of that traditionally came to pass. All of that presented itself during the times of the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem and the events there leading up to the destruction of the first temple and the first exile. Just about all of those things came true. The thing about all those curses is Moses, according to certain teachings, is trying to insinuate, despite, and it says it actually plainly there, you will return eventually. Despite all of that probably will happen to you if you go and if you bleep around and find out, as they say, if you F around and find out, there is still hope, and there is still good in you, and there is still that divine spark, and it will move you to return to discover your true self, your true origin in divinity, in Israel. And when that happens, you will then understand where you are really and what you need to do to get back home, be it spiritually or physically. Oh, pardon me. Right? To not harden your heart and to circumcise that, and to circumcise your heart, to not harden your heart, to not make your neck stiff, to circumcise yourself spiritually, that kind of thing. Okay, Oregon says, I highly recommend everyone go to the United Israel World Union YouTube and listen to Ross speak on the discovery of the Moses scroll. It is groundbreaking and highly controversial. My favorite. Well, that sounds good. Groundbreaking and controversial. I like the sound of it. So Robert says, boy, chapter 28 has some blessings, but boy, does it have some curses. Do you cherry pick that chapter? So, right, that goes exactly with what I said. I accept both. I don't cherry pick that chapter. I understand from my view of history that it's supposed to teach us what to run away from and where to run toward and what to run towards. And because it also says in Deuteronomy towards the end, Moses recites the poem Ha'azinu, where he tells the children of Israel that on that day, when you turn away from God, God will hide his own hiddenness, and he will pretend he doesn't hear you, and he will pretend he's not listening, and the lines of communication might be severed, and then it's going to be on you to keep that connection going. It's going to be on you to understand that there's something behind the veil. This idea of God hiding his own, hiding the hiddenness, as I've mentioned in the past, speaking of that Torah portion, Ha'azinu. Let's say I lost my keys. So I'm looking for my keys. Why am I looking for my keys? Because I know that I lost them. I know that something is missing. And then there's, let's say I wake up with partial amnesia, and I don't even know that I have keys. There's a door. It's locked. I'm trying to get in, but I don't even know what it is that I need to be looking for in order to open it. I don't even know of the existence of keys. It's not that I know and I'm looking for them. I don't even know that there is such a thing as keys. In that very same way, there is divine revelation and influence in the world. And there are those who know, to the degree that one can know such things, when it's hidden from them, more or less. Or let's leave it at that, right? More or less. And then there are those who don't even know that God is hiding. And so they don't even know what to seek. And Moses says it will come to pass that God will hide the idea of hiding. And you won't even know that which you need to seek. You won't even know what it is that you're supposed to be going towards, which is why you're supposed to keep the Torah. That's where it says what it is that you should be doing. What is your wisdom? What is your purpose? What is your meaning? What it is that you should be clinging to? What is it that you should be avoiding? He says, keep the Torah, because when those questions arrive, and they will, when that hiddenness, when that hiding hiddenness presents itself, and it will, when your enemies close around you and damn near eradicate you, and they will, you're going to want some answers. You're going to want to know why this is happening and what can be done. Keep the Torah then. Keep it. It's important. So yeah, I don't cherry pick that chapter. I embrace that chapter as much as I can. Oregon Freebird says, also easy for me to say, I'm not living in Babylonian siege or exile. I have a different opinion on the book of Deuteronomy. Maybe someday we could chat about it. I would love to do that. Oregon Freebird says, Robert, like what? If you could just share a little. Robert says, that's how I know it was divine, the way it changed his life. The way it changed whose life? You're talking about Moses, or are you talking about the kings? I'm not sure who you're talking about. Oregon Freebird answers, Robert, there isn't enough room in the chat, LOL. There is a book out called The Moses Scroll by Ross K. Nichols. Everyone who loves Torah and Moses, needs to read it. Powerful, says Reagans. Hi, everyone. Hi, hello to you. Again, good to see you. Robert says, I love how you say that if you set out to look for something in God's word, you will find it. Happens with me all the time, thank God. Right, which is why you also need to, I think, many times ground things in action and in have more of a stronger pillar in order to tie those strings to. Because there are so many things in the world. If you set out to find something, you're going to find it. Yeah. I already said what I had to say about that. So let's see. Oregon Freebird says, I had a dream about keys once. It was almost a Samuel experience. The crazy part is that it all came true. Sorry if this sounds a little creepy and metaphysical for me, but it's true. It doesn't sound creepy or metaphysical. Dreams have the potential of being a great channel of divine revelation, and it's not for naught that certain priests, that certain prophets, leaders, patriarchs had very interesting dreams. I myself have had a couple of experiences in dreams that I knew, as much as one can know, that these were no ordinary dreams, and that they were not just the result of, neurons firing. They weren't just the result of my stomach digesting things and the dialogue between the stomach brain and the brain, but something higher than the body, let's say, metaphysical. I know what you mean. Robert says, the scrolls the kings found. Oh, I see. You're saying that's how I know it was divine, the way it changed his life, and you're talking about the scrolls the kings found. Okay, that's how I know it was divine, the way it prompted that king to get going on the right path. Oh, I see. You're talking about Yoshiyahu there. Okay. Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, look at what divine revelation did to Abraham. Look at what divine revelation in the burning bush did to Moses. Are we supposed to, let's put it this way. There's a very good chance that Moses was a great master by the time God was revealed to him at age 80 outside of Midian in the desert. And there's a very good chance that those revelations kind of helped him along the way. The one which made him truly Moses, the deliverer, let's say, and later the lawgiver, right? The mouth of God, so to speak. That's something that happened at the burning bush. That's something that happened during that revelation, during that time, in that place, at the sacred mountain. If you're prompted by something that shakes you and stirs you enough, if it awakens something inside of you, there's no upper limit, right, to what you can do. Obviously, there is an upper limit, physically speaking, but it can kindle a fire that's so unbelievable. And the thing about fire, again, is that it rises as high as it possibly can. Part of its nature is to rise higher. Part of its nature is also to be a giver. If you take a candle and you light another candle with it, the first candle does not lose its flame. It has the ability to give of itself and lose absolutely nothing. And that's pretty unique. If you try that with the other elements, I'm pretty sure it won't work. With fire, it's able to sort of replicate and clone itself and reach higher and higher and higher, always striving, always in motion, the fire is. And again, the idea of smoke and no smoke without a flame, and that whole thing is tied together, going back to when God smelled the smoke and the savor of Noah's sacrifices, where a different curse, let's say, was broken and made into a covenant of life, that whole thing. I mean, I'm wrapping this all together. Maybe it ought not be wrapped together right now, but it's the associative. My associative mind is doing that, so please forgive me. But yes, to be prompted is a great thing, and it comes down to how is it manifested in the world. Does it bring you joy? Does it bring others joy? Because you're not supposed to be egocentric most of the time. Sometimes you should be. So if you're prompted to do something and you act it out, you need to pay attention to how it is that you are acting it out and what it is. What is the feedback that you're getting from yourself, from creation, from those around you? To each his own. But the way to know that it was divine, the way that it got the king going on the right path, it's such a difficult path to tread sometimes, because although there is great confidence and security, we are fallible. And always keeping oneself in check, always keeping oneself in balance, or striving for that, is part of what the Torah is about. It's like, yeah, check yourself before you wreck yourself, because you could definitely wreck yourself walking this path. It's something where you could think something is truly, wholly, entirely divine, and it's actually the complete opposite. And it's actually a spirit of, an ill spirit that's working through you. It's difficult to tell sometimes, which is why you should always be keeping yourself in check. And accountability is a great thing. Responsibility is a great thing. Humility is a great thing. And not biting off more than you can chew, although biting off just a touch of what than what you can chew has a lot of merit. All right, Oregon says and I think it's almost an hour. I think I'm gonna stop very soon. But this has been so much fun. But I'll read a few more. In the Prophets, says Karen, I'm enjoying this so much, so much. In the Prophets, it talks about a voice crying in the Ramah, right? Kol beRamah nishma. I think Isaiah. Why is the voice? In Jeremiah, it tells us that it is because they took the lost scroll to the prophet Huldah, and she verified its legitimacy, hence the crying in Ramah. Where she lived when the king realized they had not been keeping Torah and were subject to the curses. Well, Kol beRamah nishma, if we're talking about the same verse, it's Rachel, our great mother Rachel, Rachel crying for her kids, crying for her sons and daughters. And the revelation of God says you can stop your tears and you can still your crying, because don't think that what you're doing is fruitless. So you can still your tears and take courage, because of what you're doing now. Your children will be coming back from exile. Your sons and daughters will come back to their proper borders, let's say, and return from the land of the enemy. What did Solomon say, right, in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, right? There's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry. Or is it yeah, I think it's yes, there's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry. So I'm not sure if we're talking about the same verse, though. I'm sorry, I'm not sure which verse you speak of. All right, I'm going to read Robert's the last comment here in the chat, and then I'll say goodbye. So, seeing as how I'm going to finish this chat now, if you have anything else that you want to talk about, any questions, comments, concerns, leave them here in the comments. Is there something specific you'd want me to discuss or bring up? What can you enlighten me with? Teach me, talk to me, tell me things. So I'll read Robert's thing and then I'll say goodbye. Yesterday you said sometimes it's hard to lift your head and talk to God because of sin. But my wife said God already knows what you have done and still wants to hear from you or anyone for that fact. I agree. You should never not speak. You should never not speak. Always keep the lines of communication open. But to have times when you are lowering yourself and not lifting your head up, that can be, again, temporarily, that can bring humility. Now, shame has been shamed in recent years, or maybe not so many recent, but more recent than others, whatever it is. People are shaming shame. But shame, when it is within measure and with certain people and with certain temperaments, it can be a great boost. A great boost. Same thing to a lesser degree with guilt. I, for one, I have, and I've said this before, I think shame is good for me if I need it, but I don't like guilt. That is bad for me in my experience. So it's true that the Most High knows what we've done and still wants to hear. That's a given as far as I'm concerned. And you should always, I try to always keep those lines of communication wide open despite my most horrendous falls and wrongdoings and nastiness and malevolence, right? My evil inclination. So I keep the line of communication open, but I also know that there are times when I physically prostrate myself on the ground, even though halachically it's not really permitted, but that's why I'm not a man of halacha, right? Prostrate myself on the ground like they did at the time of the temple. And right, with spreading the legs and the arms, and speaking from that angle, like that can be a great thing at times. Your nose to the frickin' ground. You know what I mean? It can be a very good thing. A very good thing. But I know what Paula means, and she has a point. She has a point. Good night to you. Thank you. I appreciate your time, your kind attention. Those watching now, those watching later, those who watched and left. I dig your subs, your likes, your views, your comments, your questions. It's such a sustaining and enlivening practice. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you, to speak with you, spend time with you. You could be doing anything else, but you're doing this. And I thank you for that. And I hope that I make it worth your while. And I hope I merit your continued viewership, and that we'll have still a lot to talk about, a lot to do. Bring things down to the practical, stanky, nasty funk of life. From the highest highs to the lowest low, we can find ourselves in it. We can find ourselves in the Torah, in the commandments. We can see guidance and strive to guide others in a proper path, God willing. Let's have a good night. Thanks again. God bless.